Welcome to the debate. When we think of a master watchmaker at work, there's this underlying expectation of just, well, perfect mechanical harmony, right?
Yeah, absolutely.
Like every gear, every tiny little spring is meticulously placed to drive the whole mechanism forward. The mainspring transfers energy to the escapement, and that regulates the gears, all moving in this really precise, unified purpose to tell time.
Exactly. And if one single gear slips, or if one spring is wound just a bit too tight, the entire instrument doesn't just lose time, it stops functioning as a cohesive unit entirely.
Right. And that brings us to the Santiago Bernabéu in this summer of 2026. Because if you look at Real Madrid right now, you aren't looking at a masterfully crafted timepiece. You're looking at a shattered watch.
Yeah, it's a mess.
It really is. José Mourinho was returning to a squad that is overflowing with generational talent, yet they're reeling from back-to-back trophyless seasons. I mean, the dressing room is completely fractured following the successive ill-fated tenures of Xabi Alonso and Álvaro Arbeloa.
It is genuinely an unprecedented situation. I mean, you have this sheer, blinding concentration of individual brilliance contrasting with an absolute total breakdown in collective harmony.
Which forces us to look at the defining question of Mourinho's second era, quite literally, the very first decision he has to make. With long-serving captain Dani Carvajal departing, who inherits the armband?
The million-dollar question.
Exactly. I keep looking at this fractured dressing room, and I genuinely don't understand how you give it to a senior player involved in the drama. Doesn't Jude Bellingham make the most sense? Or must Mourinho respect the established, rigid hierarchy to maintain whatever fragile piece remains?
That's the crux of it, yeah.
So my stance today is that Bellingham's unifying character, combined with his status as Mourinho's tactical warrior, makes him the absolutely essential choice to reset a completely broken culture.
Well, and I will argue that elevating Bellingham in this manner violates crucial, deeply entrenched club traditions. Doing so places dangerous pressure on a 22-year-old player who is already frankly suffocating under a shifting tactical role, and it risks an immediate, irreversible mutiny among the senior players.
Let's lay out the foundation of what we're actually looking at here. Okay, Jude Bellingham is the right choice for this captaincy precisely because he's insulated from the toxic factionalism that's currently drowning this squad.
Insulated, sure, but
look at the reality of this environment. We had a highly publicized physical training ground altercation between Federico Valverde, who remember is the current vice captain, and Aurélien Tchouameni. That is the environment Mourinho is walking into. He desperately needs a proxy on the pitch who transcends these internal wars.
I hear the appeal of a clean break, I really do, but we cannot ignore the mechanical reality of how Real Madrid functions.
But beyond that, Mourinho has praised Bellingham's immense maturity since the player was just 17 years old. We all saw their interaction after the 2024 Champions League final, right? Where Bellingham introduced his mother to Mourinho.
Yeah, it was a nice moment.
It was a human moment, but it underscored a deep mutual respect. Bellingham represents the ultimate, uncompromising professional standard that Mourinho demands from his leaders.
Okay, but this club is governed by deeply entrenched, almost institutional traditions. The primary rule of that dressing room is that the captaincy goes to the longest-serving player, period.
Is that really set in stone, though?
It is an ironclad succession line. Thibaut Courtois or Vinícius Junior are naturally next in line. Even departing captain Dani Carvajal explicitly referenced Valverde taking the honor. Bypassing these highly influential senior figures for a player entering only his fourth season isn't just a managerial tweak, it's an earthquake.
But wait, look at the actual behavior of these senior players. This is exactly why the romantic idea of Madrid's hierarchy has to be dismantled.
You can't just dismantle it without consequences. This is a dressing room infamous for dangerous player power. If Mourinho disrupts that hierarchy on day one, he risks losing the team before he even sets up his first training drill.
You mentioned Valverde earlier. I genuinely want to know, how can a manager attempting to build a unified, disciplined squad hand the ultimate leadership role to a player who was literally fighting his midfield partner on the training pitch?
Emotions run high. It happens.
That inherently disqualifies him as a unifying figure. And if we look elsewhere at the senior ranks, the picture isn't any better. Kylian Mbappé, despite his pedigree as the French national captain and an astonishing 86 goals in his first 2 seasons in Madrid, is actively being booed by the Bernabéu crowd for perceived lack of commitment.
Yeah, the fans are demanding.
So the established alternatives are severely compromised.
Compromised or not, they hold the power.
But if the goal is to create Mourinho's famous siege mentality, how can you hand the armband to the very players who are tearing each other apart under Xabi Alonso?
Because you have to manage the reality of the room.
Think about how a toxic corporate culture fails. If a company is going bankrupt because of internal mismanagement, you don't promote the executives who caused the dysfunction just because they've been sitting at their desks the longest. That's a recipe for total collapse. Mourinho needs a cultural reset. He needs a circuit breaker, not a continuation of the old guard's entitlement.
The corporate analogy makes logical sense from the outside. I'll give you that. But football dressing rooms, especially at the Bernabéu, they do not operate like corporate boardrooms. They operate like a parliamentary system.
A parliamentary system?
Yes. Power isn't just top-down. It's formed by coalitions. Players have factions. If Mourinho bypasses Valverde or Vinicius, their factions simply vote no confidence on the pitch. They do this by ignoring tactical instructions, by dropping their intensity in training, by leaking to the Spanish press.
That sounds like a reason to break the factions, not appease them.
We don't have to guess how this plays out because we have historical precedent. Look at Mourinho's disastrous falling out with Iker Casillas during his first stint in Madrid. Mourinho tried to circumvent the established power structures to assert his authority, and the dressing room simply vetoed him.
That was a completely different era, though.
It fractured the club and precipitated his exit. Taking the armband from the established line of succession isn't a reset. It is a declaration of war against the most powerful voting blocs in the squad.
Okay, you bring up the danger of alienating these factions, and the absolute epicenter of that danger has to be Vinícius Junior. He is arguably the most powerful figure in that parliamentary system you just described.
Easily. No question.
And his history with Mourinho complicates his viability as a leader immensely.
It does complicate it, but it also presents Mourinho with a massive psychological opportunity. We know that Vinicius and Mourinho have already been in touch to establish a clean slate ahead of the season.
Right, the clean slate.
And we have to remember the mechanics of why a clean slate was necessary. Recall that explosive Champions League clash when Vinicius alleged racial abuse by Mourinho's Benfica player Gianluca Prestiani.
Oh yeah, that was a heavy situation.
Prestiani was later punished for homophobic, not racial, abuse. But the incident was a powder keg. Look at Mourinho's duality in that moment. On the pitch, he was empathetic. He put his arm around Vinicius, comforted him. But post-match, in the press conference, Mourinho sharply criticized Vinicius for his provocative behavior.
Exactly. He criticized him.
It's a heavy, complicated history. Making Vinicius captain right now is the ultimate olive branch. It secures the absolute loyalty of the team's most potent player. Xabi Alonso's heavy-handed management failed spectacularly because he tried to suppress Vinicius. Giving Vinicius the armband says, "This is your team. I trust you."
I just don't see how a clean slate translates into a mandate for leadership. Agreeing not to be enemies is not the same thing as being equipped to lead.
It's about empowerment.
Now, I know anyone listening who watched the Clásico in May is probably screaming at their steering wheel right now saying, wait, Vinicius already wore the armband. But wearing it once because of injuries or substitutions is vastly different than being the institutional day-to-day anchor of a Mourinho system.
He's the heartbeat of the team.
Look at Mourinho's historical track record. His greatest, most defining captains, John Terry at Chelsea, Javier Zanetti at Inter Milan, they were emotional anchors. They were stoic. They were structurally disciplined extensions of the manager's brain. Vinicius, for all his breathtaking world-class talent, attracts conflict.
He thrives on it, though.
He thrives in chaos. He is provocative by nature. Mourinho needs a captain who calms a storm, not the guy who is actively acting as a lightning rod.
But Vinicius's fire is what drives the entire engine of Real Madrid. He drags them into fights they have no business winning. If you alienate him by skipping him for a younger, newer player like Bellingham, you extinguish that fire, or worse, you turn that fire directly against the manager.
That assumes Bellingham isn't already deeply respected by Vinicius, which by all accounts, he is.
Respect is one thing, the armband is another.
But let's step away from the pure politics of the dressing room for a moment and look at the actual reality on the pitch, because the tactical burden we are placing on whoever wears this armband is massive.
And this is exactly where the argument for Bellingham completely falls apart for me. We have to look at the mechanical reality of Bellingham's current trajectory, because his statistical decline is sharp and it is highly concerning.
It's a role change, not a decline in quality.
But look at the numbers. In his debut season, he scored 23 goals. He looked unstoppable. Then Mbappé arrived. Bellingham's goal tally plummeted 14 last year, and he has a mere 5 La Liga goals in this current campaign.
But we know why that is happening.
Exactly, we know why. It is because of how Mbappé operates. Because Mbappé operates almost entirely as a luxury forward who refuses to track back, there's a massive vacuum in the left channel during defensive transitions.
Right, someone has to cover it.
Bellingham is being forced to cover 30 extra yards per game just to plug that hole. He is exhausted before Madrid even transition into the final third. He's undergoing a massive, punishing tactical transformation.
Which makes him crucial.
In Mourinho's new counterattacking system, the roles are ruthlessly defined. Right? Arda Güler is the launcher. Mbappé and Vinicius are the two bullets, and Bellingham is expected to be the warrior. He is doing all the heavy lifting. Adding the colossal psychological weight of the Real Madrid captaincy to a 22-year-old who is already physically struggling to master a completely new, exhausting tactical profile is going to break him.
I completely agree with your assessment of what is happening to him tactically, but I draw the exact opposite conclusion.
Really? How so?
Mourinho isn't burying Bellingham with this workload. He is building his entire midfield engine around him. And we have a blueprint for how Mourinho handles this exact profile of player. Look at Frank Lampard.
Okay, Lampard is a different era.
But Mourinho explicitly compared Bellingham to Lampard, and the mechanics of that Chelsea era are crucial here. Lampard scored 71 goals in 215 games under Mourinho. He won back-to-back Premier League Player of the Season awards, and crucially, he did all of that while serving as the core vocal leader of the team.
He had a lot of help.
Bellingham possesses a superior technical palette to Lampard. He is the ultimate box-to-box warrior. Giving him the captaincy won't distract him. It will empower him.
How does a piece of cloth on his arm give him his legs back in the 80th minute?
Because it changes the context of his sacrifice. Right now, he is just a younger player running himself into the ground to cover for superstars who won't defend. If you give him the armband, it tells him you are not just sacrificing your stats for Mbappé, you are the undisputed general of this system.
It's just a symbol.
It gives his deeper role immense prestige. When Lampard read those late runs into the box, it was because the entire team was structurally organized around his movements. Bellingham needs that absolute authority to organize the players ahead of him.
There is a massive difference between being a general in a rigid Chelsea system from 2 decades ago and managing the modern Galacticos. Lampard was surrounded by seasoned, blue-collar veterans who largely managed themselves defensively.
Bellingham is definitely not surrounded by blue-collar veterans.
Exactly. Bellingham is surrounded by massive, fragile egos. The cognitive load of having to cover the ground for 2 attacking bullets who do not track back, while also managing the referee, rallying the crowd, and keeping Valverde and Tchouaméni from each other's throats, it is simply too much to ask of a player who just wants to find his form again.
Speaking of sacrifices and covering ground, this directly ties into someone else who desperately needs Bellingham to take control. We have to talk about one of the most critical tactical puzzles Mourinho faces right now, the defensive rebuild, and specifically integrating and protecting Trent Alexander-Arnold.
Oh, this is a fascinating tactical issue because it highlights exactly what Mourinho has to fix. Trent has established himself as the first-choice right-back since arriving, but the intense criticism surrounding his defensive flaws hasn't gone away.
Not at all.
Now, Mourinho has a rich history of adapting to different profiles of fullbacks. He's managed strict defensive stalwarts who never cross the halfway line like Paulo Ferreira and Cesar Azpilicueta.
True, he loves a disciplined fullback.
Knows he cannot turn Trent into a traditional stay-at-home defender. He has to give him the license to thrill going forward while simultaneously drilling him in the defensive dark arts.
Which takes time to learn.
Teaching him how to position his body to delay wingers, when to commit the tactical foul, how to survive in isolation. Mourinho's challenge is masking Trent's defensive deficiencies while maximizing that generational right foot.
Spot on. But how does a manager actually mask a fullback's deficiencies in real time? By relying on structural protection from the midfield.
Okay, I see where you're going.
For a highly attacking, occasionally vulnerable fullback like Trent to survive the rigorous defensive demands of a José Mourinho system, he needs absolute vocal protection. He needs a tactically disciplined captain operating in the midfield right next to him.
But why does that require the captaincy?
Because of the authority required to dictate spacing, when Trent bombs forward, Bellingham has to drop into the half space, that crucial pocket between the wing and the center of the pitch.
Sure, that's just basic tactics.
By occupying that zone, Bellingham forces the opposing winger to choose between tracking him or attacking the space Trent just left, essentially cutting off the passing lane. Bellingham is his international teammate with England. They have an established shorthand. Bellingham naturally does this job.
He does do it naturally.
But a winger like Vinicius, positioned high up the pitch on the completely opposite flank, cannot provide that structural or vocal leadership during defensive transitions. The captain needs to be in the engine room, managing the spacing, shouting the adjustments.
The tactical logic of Bellingham dropping into the half space to protect Trent is perfectly sound. But again, defensive communication does not require an armband.
It helps, though.
Bellingham can cover Trent's runs, cut off passing lanes, and shout tactical instructions regardless of who is officially captain. The armband at Real Madrid is highly symbolic. It is about institutional respect and hierarchy.
But
Giving it to Bellingham, simply to solve a tactical communication issue on the right flank, fundamentally misunderstands what the captaincy means to the Spanish media, the fans, and the senior players. Mourinho can easily instruct Bellingham to be the tactical general without detonating the dressing room hierarchy to do it.
But symbolism matters immensely to the players executing the system. If Bellingham is taking on the immense physical burden of covering Trent and doing the unglamorous defensive running while Mbappe and Vinicius operate as the luxury bullets, he needs the institutional authority to hold those players accountable.
Good luck holding Mbappe accountable.
If he doesn't have the armband and he demands Mbappe track back after a turnover, the unwritten hierarchy undermines his authority. Mbappe can just brush him off. The armband gives Bellingham the absolute mandate to demand the ultimate professional standard from everyone, which is exactly what Mourinho needs to fix this broken watch.
I'm sorry, but I just don't buy the premise that a 22-year-old, even with the armband, is going to successfully order Kylian Mbappe to track back if Mbappe doesn't want to.
So what's the alternative? Let him do whatever he wants.
Authority in that specific dressing room is earned through tenure, through Champions League medals won at the club, through Ballon d'Ors. It is not earned just by manager appointment. If Bellingham tries to enforce rules on players who feel they outrank him historically, he will be isolated incredibly quickly. The seniority tradition exists to prevent exactly that kind of internal civil war.
It is a profound tension, and it really gets to the core of what a manager can and cannot control. Let's pull back and look at where we stand on this dilemma. My position remains that Jude Bellingham is the only candidate practically equipped to navigate this crisis.
And I still disagree.
He has the emotional maturity, the universal respect, and the exact tactical profile to serve as Mourinho's proxy on the pitch. By elevating Bellingham, Mourinho can bypass the toxic factionalism of the Alonso and Arbeloa eras, empower his midfield warrior with genuine authority, and definitively reset the culture of a club that has, frankly, forgotten how to win together.
And I maintain that ignoring the club's strict seniority rules to bypass figures like Vinícius Junior or Federico Valverde is a fatal miscalculation of dressing room politics. It will ignite a fire before Mourinho even takes his first training session.
Even with everything we've discussed.
Yes, the tactical burdens on Bellingham are already immense given his statistical drop-off, and thrusting the crushing politics of the Real Madrid captaincy onto him risks breaking the very player Mourinho needs most. The hierarchy exists for a reason. Respecting it, specifically by leveraging it to get Vinicius on board, is the only way to ensure the heavyweights buy into the project.
Well, I think it is safe to say we acknowledge a significant point of convergence here. We completely agree that Mourinho is facing a monumental, almost unprecedented task.
Oh, definitely.
He has to balance some of the most massive, fragile egos in world football. He has to fix a glaring tactical imbalance caused by the sheer gravity of Mbappe's refusal to defend, and he has to somehow coach up Trent Alexander-Arnold's defensive skills to survive in the ruthless knockout stages of the Champions League. The stakes are astronomical.
Absolutely. The intersection of deeply entrenched club traditions and incredibly demanding modern tactical requirements creates a fascinating puzzle. It's one thing to draw up a brilliant counterattacking system on a whiteboard, right?
Right.
It's entirely another to convince this unique generation of Galacticos to sacrifice their individual brands and their stats for the collective grind.
Which brings us right back to our shattered watch. The individual pieces are all there, gleaming and incredibly valuable, but forcing them to work in harmony requires a masterstroke of both tactical design and deep psychological manipulation.
It really does.
The true test of Mourinho's second era at Real Madrid will be whether his man management has evolved enough to handle these modern superstars without breaking the mechanism entirely. Who wears the armband is just the first turn of the dial. Thank you for joining us on the debate. We'll leave it to you to decide who should lead Los Blancos into the future.